propulsion continues to be nominal.
Alright, chamber pressure looks good.
Toggling up. Roger roll with Linus.
Water towers can fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight outside SC off. Bring in SC off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.
All right, good morning or good afternoon or whatever time it is where you are, everybody. You are taking a look live now in Starbase, Texas, where as of right now, SpaceX is doing testing with Ship 24 and Booster 7. You can already see from the clouds and stuff around at the bottom that there is methane in the works, and it looks like we are about to get frosty here. So hopefully we'll get some 5x5s here in chat. Make sure you can hear me, because I am not the only one here as well. I am also joined by Alex. How's it going, Alex?
Well, it's going more or less well, I guess. Today's a little bit more cloudy than it was last week, and also I see the tank from there. It's creating its own basically its own clouds.
Yeah, so essentially it's Vandenberg, Texas at the moment with that, but yes. At least we can see the rocket as a whole from some of our cameras here and clearly see the venting off there. And we will have a couple more voices joining us throughout the broadcast, and today it will be Michael Baylor, who is operating everything behind the scenes, pulling the levers, pushing the buttons, and making sure our robot cameras are happy and shooting what we need. So right now, as we mentioned, we can see those methane subcoolers firing up on the bottom, and you can start to see a little bit of frost now forming on the booster. So Alex, can you kind of point out what we're looking at here at the moment? And as a reminder, if you have any questions, you could tag us at NASASpaceflight, and we will do our best to answer them.
Yes, so we're basically here watching the full stack here at a Starbase of Booster 7 and Ship 24. The tank farm fired up really early today, around 2 or 3 hours ago. And it usually takes a little bit of time to get there, and we saw the oil and venting, the tower also venting, things like that. That usually indicates that they're ready for propellant load. And well, once the OLM vent stops, that indicates they're loading liquid oxygen. But also at the same time, around more or less around the same minute, they also fired up the methane subcoolers. That is an indication that they're loading methane. We can see, maybe not exactly from this view, but you can see kind of behind the OLM there, the methane subcoolers is like a vent to the side. And that's sort of the indication. There we go, from this side. It's a little bit more cloudy, but yeah, you can see there that sideways vent that usually indicates that methane loading onto the vehicle. It's ironically also an indicator of when they spool down the subcoolers. But yeah, it was pretty much like it all depends on when you see it. If you're expecting the tank farm to spool up and like have propellant load, obviously it's an indication of that. It's not the opposite. And as we can see there, there's frost going on, and we can see there that liquid oxygen tank being loaded and that methane tank being loaded as well on top. And we can see the tower venting as well, which we think it is pretty much sort of the same kind of deal as the OLM vent, which indicates that they're chilling down the pipes going for the liquid oxygen. Similar to Falcon 9. If you've been with any of our live streams for Falcon 9, you might know the famous T-minus 20-minute vent. We had a Falcon 9 launch this morning, by the way, if you want to rewatch that as well later. But yeah, not right now, later. So yeah, it pretty much seems to be that kind of same venting prior to loading liquid oxygen, just to chill down the pipes. And right now, we haven't seen any sort of loading onto Ship 24, but we're kind of hoping that once that vent stops at the tower, we'll see that sort of loading onto the vehicle.
All right. It helps when you're off mute. So I mentioned earlier that we would have more voices, and one of those additional voices joining us is Thomas Berghart. Thomas, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Sawyer. Thanks for having me. Joining some quick spool up testing from Starbase, looks like.
Awesome. Well, we are glad to have you here as well. I know you and I both had our early mornings with the first launch, and now we get Starbase fun too.
Yeah, from both of SpaceX's, well, I guess two of the three. Forgot Vandenberg for a second. But Falcon 9 action earlier, and now more full stack testing. This is the second day of propellant load testing for the full stack. We saw the other one last week. And any idea what exactly we want to expect today? Last time we saw them do a partial fill of the booster, and at least they started doing some prop load into the ship because we saw that new engine chill vent that Alex is like, that's Alex's new favorite thing, I think. But started loading
Cool. It
some.
looks cool.
It is cool. Started loading onto the ship a little bit too, but we didn't
Literally.
even see any frost lines form, so didn't look like they did a
Mm.
whole lot of loading. We'll see if we get something different today. Lots of frost already forming on the booster, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can definitely
And
see it.
from oh, go ahead, Sawyer.
No, I was just gonna say you could tell the kind of the different tanks in there as well. You could see how it's not continuously going straight up the rocket. You've got the one at the midpoint, and then you've got the one closer to the OLM too.
Yeah,
Yep.
and we sort of will expect the ship to be loaded later. Sort of also, I'm sorry for pointing out Falcon 9, but like that's the previous rocket that SpaceX developed. So a lot of things are probably based on that experience. And here, pretty much, we're seeing that they're loading the booster first. That's sort of the same thing that they do for Falcon 9. They load first the booster, and then comes the second stage. Here, the second stage is obviously the ship, Starship. So yeah, it seems like we're in that stage where they're loading the booster. Oh, we see uh a vent there going on.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So right now, also depending on the views, you might see a vent from like near the tower. That is the engine chill vent for the booster.
Yeah, we'll point that out
Very
when
very
we.
boring, if you
Yeah,
ask.
we'll point
The
out
ship ones are
the
exciting.
other engine chill vent that I was talking about earlier. We'll point that out if and when it starts. But yeah, we saw some venting from what appeared to be the LOX tank briefly there,
Mhm.
but stop now.
Yep. It's not a deep press vent. That's
Yeah, no,
like
not long enough or
when
strong
it's
enough to be a
Right.
deep press vent.
yeah
I think
when
that's
it
why
is
we
a
both
deep press
stopped
vent.
because we wanted to see if that's what it was, but then it stopped, so we're good.
When it is one, it's like you notice it is a deep
Yeah.
press vent because it's all the vents going on at the same time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, some people just before we dive into questions, I think probably the most asked question is like, what the heck are they doing today, right? Apart from loading Propellant, okay, but like, is this test gonna be any sort of different from what we've seen so far? And I think there's some clues at least, right? Like, we've seen so far that today it's been pretty much like what they did on Friday. They closed the road at that new point. It's actually a bit closer to the launch site this time around, but just a little bit. It's not like a huge thing that they've done. They closed one of the roads at the village as well. That was also the same thing that they did on Friday. The exclusion zone for today is the same as the testing that they did on Friday. So, what is the conclusion? Mine is that it's probably gonna be more or less like what we saw on Friday. Maybe a bit more. I don't know. Like maybe they load a couple of rings more on each tank. Maybe we see frost on the ship. But
Yeah, that's what I want to see. I want to see
yeah,
actual, like, legitimate, a significant amount of propellant load on the ship, which we haven't seen yet for the full stack.
exactly. And the vent on the tower stop.
Which is a sign that they are likely beginning loading onto the ship, right?
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah,
That's
that
the hope.
purge event that Alex was describing earlier, and definitely loading underway on the booster. Obviously, the frost ring gives that away, but hopefully loading on the ship. I think the first sign that ship loading is actually underway will probably be that engine chill vent. That's probably our first indicator after the tower vent stops, if I had to guess. So
Same. And to go with the same speculation as Alex, I think, again, based on what we saw, hopefully this just means they're filling additional fuels, especially like you were talking about aboard Ship 24. Because, I mean, with what Alex was describing, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, and if it honks like a raptor, then
It's a fully fueled Starship?
yeah, hopefully.
But yeah, so Alex, I want to dive into that for sure. And then, of course, if you've got questions additionally about what's going on, please tag us with @NASASpaceflight in chat. I'll be bringing those in best we can. Already have some to go through, but I want to address basically what we're expecting first. And a lot of people are asking, is this the wet dress rehearsal? And we have a couple of reasons why I think we're leaning towards no. Although, again, we don't expect SpaceX to formally announce that per se, at least not until after the fact. So we want to point to why we would guess that this will end up being similar to the previous test. But then also, of course, we will just update you as the test goes along. We are expecting more pretty significant evacuations for the wet dress rehearsal, which have not occurred today. Like Alex said, more or less similar roadblock location from the previous test, right?
From what I've heard, yes, it's pretty much the exact same spot.
So no significant evacuation of Boca Chica Village, which indicates that this is not the full wet dress rehearsal. That likely means it'll be a partial propellant load, just like we saw in the previous test. That doesn't mean it can't be more than the previous test, but it's likely not going to be a full load. Also, we have questions asking how do we know this isn't a static fire test, and that goes back into there's no overpressure notice. So not only did they not evacuate the village, which they don't have to do necessarily for a static fire test, but we also know that no overpressure notice has been delivered, which means there is no static fire planned, basically no engine test planned. That this is just a propellant loading test. And additionally, based on the most recent word from Mr. Elon Musk on Twitter, this was in a reply to Chris Bergen actually on Twitter, basically saying Crispy threw out like, hold on, I'll find the exact tweet so that I don't misquote it, but basically put out a expectation of what the steps might be. If anyone has that tweet handy, link it to me while I try to furiously Google it.
Pulling it up right now. At least I'm trying to, yeah.
Let's see, here we go, found it. So, Crispy said a wet dress rehearsal next week. This was last week. So a wet dress, destack for 33 engine static fire, final TPS work on Ship 24, restack, and then launch license. And Elon said, quote, that's a good guess. So on the right track, at least, pending maybe some details or plans subject to change. But that tweet did include that they would destack prior to the 33 engine static fire. So it sounds like that will be the booster on its own, and then they will restack for the launch attempt. At least that was the plan as of last week. Plans can always change, but no overpressure notice is the sure indicator that there's no static fire test planned today. And the lack of evacuations points to a partial test rather than a full wet dress rehearsal. Again, that sets the expectations. Obviously, plans can change, and we'll have to wait and see exactly how far they get on today's testing. Right now, we are suspecting that they are into propellant load onto Ship 24 because of the stopping tower vent. Although there's a little bit of venting from what we're seeing on like the bottom left-hand side of this camera view, Alex. But is that different, right?
Yeah, that's a different point of venting there.
Okay. So, suspected ship loading, and we'll get more evidence of that if that engine chill vents start or if frost rings appear on the ship. And we are definitely into loading onto the booster because frost rings have formed on both the liquid oxygen and methane tanks on the booster. And that dives into another question that I want to bring in here from Rick, asking why is there no overpressure notice when there is clearly methane involved? And we've seen this before. We've seen propellant loading tests occur before when both propellants are actually in use. And the overpressure notice, we basically don't necessarily expect those unless an engine test is involved, right, Alex?
Exactly, and the thing is, we do so. There's kind of I don't know how to explain it, but like when it is a load that is manageable from a safety standpoint, we don't expect an overpressure notice. But when it seems like there's a threshold where one will expect like actual evacuations and things like that. Like especially for a wet dress rehearsal, you would expect them to like actually go through the whole deal of actually evacuating not only the villagers, like residents, like Mary and all that, but also the employees. Like it's basically a hazard for everyone out there to stay like within 1.5 miles of 5,000 tons of explosives. That's not good. If something were to happen that, knock on wood, nothing happens. But if it were to happen, it definitely is kind of dangerous. Now, it is true that the current exclusion zone, it might allow some certain amount of propellant load of methane and liquid oxygen onto the vehicle that doesn't need an overpressure notice for the villagers, right? For the residents there. So that's sort of the whole deal here. That when we've seen overpressure notices, it's always been because they've been doing some kind of engine testing, and that's sort of the correlation here that we have. We haven't received, like, Mary hasn't received any sort of notice for today's test. She didn't get that also for last week's test, and I don't think she received either for some of the full stack testing that they did last year. So there we go.
Thank you, Alex. I'll bring in some more questions here, and Martin Davis has perhaps the $1 million question: how long until test flight do we think? So we just provided that list of kind of the milestones that we're looking for, and I'll offer Alex and Sawyer's opinions on this as well. But expecting that after a wet dress rehearsal is completed, which again, likely today's test will not check off that milestone. This is probably in preparation for a full wet dress rehearsal, either later this week or next week. But after the wet dress rehearsal, we would expect a D-stack to allow final preparation work on Ship 24. They got to remove lift points from the nose cone to patch up and finish the heat shield and stuff like that. And then once that is complete, while that's being completed, the booster will be able to enter its 33 engine static fire. It's fired up to 14 so far, but they still want to test fire the full engine complement before a launch attempt. So they will do that. And then if that test is nominal, then they'll go into a restack and preparations for launch. It is my personal opinion that only the schedule for the next milestone, which in this case is the wet dress rehearsal, can be predicted with any sort of confidence, because every test after that relies on the previous test going successfully. And while a wet dress rehearsal is probably the least ambitious of the tests, propellant loading should hopefully be able to be knocked out either this week or next. A 33 engine static fire is certainly uncharted territory, and of course the launch attempt itself is very much uncharted territory. So my prediction is that wet dress by the end of next week, but beyond that it's really hard to predict when they'll get to static fire or launch.
I think they're already loading. I'm seeing some vents from the skirt on the ship. And also I was seeing, while you were speaking, I was looking at that QD, and you can see some vapors coming up from it. So they're definitely loading stuff. We might see that engine chill vent going off.
Yeah, just to the left of where the QD is connecting. That small vent, is that what you're looking at?
Yep, that one. And also right behind the QD, like the pipes going into it.
Mm-hmm. Of course, we're getting obscured by some vapors now, but
of course.
Exactly.
There's the engine chill vent.
There you go.
There it is.
Alright, so that is the new vent that we saw for the first time on the previous full stack testing. So you see the middle grid fin of the three that you can see in this view. Just to the left of that, there's a pipe running from the ship down across the booster, and then at the bottom there's some venting coming out. That appears to be the engine chill vent, which basically means once they start loading propellant into the ship, some of that propellant gets bled through the engines, they start cooling engine components and things like that, and then it gets vented overboard down there. So that is a sign that propellant is on board, or at least liquid oxygen is on board the ship. Now we'll have a better idea of how much liquid oxygen and any methane that's being loaded onto the ship as well when frost rings appear on one or both of those tanks. But for now, we do know that propellant load is now underway on the ship as well, in addition to the booster.
It's also just because when we're talking about the static fire test of all 33 engines without the ship, there's this usual question, like why don't they use the ship as a like load to hold down the booster kind of thing, right?
Hmm.
And it's a fair question. Like that is actually a genuine question, because if you think about it, it's like, well, it makes sense, right? To hold down the booster, but it turns out, for static fire tests, they already have a way to sort of boost the hold down capacity of the clamps. Basically, a set of turnbuckles that they can use to compress basically the upper lip of those clamps to be able to compress on the booster and keep it held down. And the thing is, if you do the math, when we saw that 14 engine static fire test, I think it was in November, when we saw that, if you do the math, the actual force that each clamp had to hold upwards, it was approximately the same as if you were doing a 33 engine static fire, but like with a full stack. So, or like even more. So if they can hold that force, they can obviously do the same, but without the ship on top. So it definitely seems like those clamps are made, like the way that they can be configured for that testing is already way tough enough for that kind of testing. So that's another kind of. It's obviously not a confirmation, not any sort of excuse or anything like that, but it is certainly something that is not of a concern if they actually do a static fire test without the ship on top. It's not really a concern about the cuties, like the clamps and things like that. It's already kind of been proved already with just 14 engines.
Yeah, sure. Also, again, I'll keep reiterating the points because there's going to be a lot of frequently asked questions here. Had someone in chat asking what's with the consensus on destack before the 33 engine static fire, and that's just citing an Elon Musk reply on Twitter that basically that said that's a good guess, quote, to the plan being a destack before the 33 engine static fire. Again, plans can change, and that reply isn't exactly full confirmation, but it certainly seems that is the plan because he didn't call that out as incorrect or anything. But plans can obviously change. What we do know is that there's no static fire today. That we know for certain. I'll keep questions coming though, so let's see what we've got. Jack Bartlett with a question. Appears that the chines on the booster are not symmetrical or mounted offset. What's the reason behind this? Alex, care to explain?
Oh yeah, so there's actually like two big chines and two smaller chines. I think ones are like strakes and the others are like actual chines or things like that. But yeah, they are not symmetric. It's more like how to say, it's more like they are lined up. It seems like they are actually lined up with the grid fins, and the grid fins are not like 90 degrees with each other. They're not separated by 90 degrees. So it seems like it's sort of the same kind of symmetry as the grid fins, as in the location around the booster. But yeah, and that might have to do with what Elon talked with Tim on one of his interviews, where he actually talked about how those chines are supposed to take the air as it descends through the atmosphere after reentry and everything, and kind of slow down and reduce, like it has more drag, it has less terminal speed, so they basically save on propellant for landing, and it's very useful. So it kind of makes sense that you want that kind of I don't know how, like bowl kind of thing, where you're not like perfectly flat, you're not 180 degrees one from each other, but more like 120.
It's not a belly flop, but
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's not a belly flop, but you kind of want some kind of bowl effect there underneath the booster in that side.
Yeah, more like
To
kind of
catch
landing
the air.
awkwardly and ending up still with a little bit of a red stomach.
yeah, so basically, to summarize, aerodynamic effects that help slow yourself down passively, and Falcon 9 does something similar, although without those specific aerodynamic features, but using the grid fins, Falcon 9 also steers itself so it's not falling straight down. It's falling at a bit of an angle of attack, and that helps slow down and reduce the propellant you need for the landing, like Alex said. Booster expected to do the same, but use those chines to be able to fly a little bit more dramatically. And you may have heard the phrase cross-range capability, that which is basically a measure of how far can the vehicle glide without propulsion. And if you have more cross-range capability, you can glide a little bit farther and thus bleed off a little bit more energy before you need to light the engine, so you need less propellant. All right, and really quick, this one we can take quickly. Isaac's saying, which tank is on the top and which tank is on the bottom? And I believe on both ship and booster, the top tank is your methane tank and your bottom tank is your liquid oxygen. And Alex will yell at me if I got that wrong, but I'm pretty sure I've got it right.
Top methane, bottom oxygen.
Yes.
On
Correct.
both ship and booster.
I got it right. I finally learned. And
Someone
Christy in our
mentioned in the back
background
channel.
says, cross-range shuttle. Yes,
Shuttle,
thank you,
there you
Chris.
go.
Shuttle did have cross range, that's for sure.
It doesn't have delta wings though.
Oh my goodness, imagine Delta Wings on a Super Heavy booster. Or the ship.
I don't know,
for
which
that
do you like
matter.
better, Delta Wings or Chines?
I'm just saying the Starship's going to eventually evolve into a space plane. I'm just kidding, but it'd be kind of fun. Do you want to bring in some super chats and stuff as well? And some of these have some questions. So, Good Gremlin says, when load testing the hold down clamps, was the payload mass accounted for? I would imagine that compared to the overall mass of a fully fueled vehicle, the payload mass is probably almost negligible. Otherwise, it's pretty easy to build that in with a little bit more margin. I mean, do we... this is a strong ask, but Alex, any chance you have, like, the fully fueled mass of a full Starship stack, or is that too specific of an ask?
It is probably too specific, but it is certainly possible that they just basically how to say that they had margins in their testing.
Right.
We usually, it's traditional in aerospace in general to have, when you do a testing, especially non-destructive testing, that you kind of try to go a little bit beyond what you design, just to make sure that it actually is capable of just have some margin beyond what you've actually been designed that thing for. And usually on uncrewed rockets, the safety margin it's like 1.2, but usually on crewed rockets, it's more closer to like 1.4 or something like that. So yeah.
And also along those lines with the payload, a reminder that Ship 24 right now has its Pez dispenser, basically the payload door sealed completely shut. So
Yep.
it couldn't, even if they wanted to at this point. But also I wonder, and again, this is pure speculation at this point, if since this is the first iteration of the orbital version with the tiles and everything, that maybe as they get to later and later vehicles, they'll get lighter and lighter. So in a way, it kind of accounts for that extra payload mass. Again, purely speculation, but that's basically what happened with Shuttle. Is the first one, Columbia, was super heavy, and by the time they got to Endeavor, it was the lightest one.
Super heavy, you say, huh?
Oh, yeah. I just thought
And
that.
I'll move on.
It's also just to point out something, that it is also worth important to mention that the payload mass at most that they have claimed to be able to lift into orbit is 150 tons. The whole thing fully fueled is 5,000 tons at least, like rounding down a little. So yeah, it's like 3% of the whole weight of the rocket. Not a lot of weight added onto it. Like if you have a margin of 1.1, that weight is 1.03. So you're probably with some kind of margin left there.
And just to update, Christy reminded me that my brain was on my favorite shuttle, Endeavor. It was actually Atlantis that was the lightest of the ships, which, again, is the second newest, I believe, of the entire fleet. So that one, Endeavor had some extra cryo tanks on top of it that caused, and plumbing that made it weigh a touch more. But you get the point. And I will now hand in my Shuttle Geek card to the Chris's.
That's funny. All right, bringing in some more questions here. Let's see. Chris asks, where would the frost line start on ship 24? If we could switch to a camera view that has the ship like rings visible, Alex, could you point to us where that engine skirt stops and where the bottom tank starts?
Yes, let's see if the orbiter. There we go. So where the QD is located and interfaces with the ship, you can see right above it. There's like some kind of bracing thing around the ship, like it's some kind of band, like
Mhm.
like a band of metal around it. That's like a reinforcement kind of thing that they add to the weld of the aft dome with the ship. And so right above it is where the frost will begin to appear once they start loading. The thing is, I should point out a couple of things. So as soon as we saw that engine shield pipe venting, the tower started venting like a few minutes later. So it kind of indicates, again, once we see the OLM or tower vents going on, it basically indicates that nothing other than liquid nitrogen is going through those pipes. So that's sort of the whole deal. Because if it were loading, nothing should be venting from that pipe, right? It makes sense.
Right.
Because otherwise it will be leaving the pipe. But if they were draining, they will also not be venting anything, because again, it will also be the same pipe that is used for loading. It's also used for draining. So whenever we see a vent, there's basically no liquid oxygen passing through the QD. It's true that we don't know about the methane. It's always that kind of enigma there, like it's a mystery, because you cannot really vent freely the methane. When you have to vent it, you have to vent it. Like for example, when they vent the methane tank, they vent the ullage, the gaseous form of the methane, because they don't have any other choice. They could, but they want to use those vents as thrusters. So there we go. It's kind of a double edge knife kind of thing, and so we saw that vent on the tower. I saw a little bit of a trickling on the OLM vent as well, so it might indicate that we're in a pause right now into that loading. We'll see what happens, but so far it's looking pretty much like Friday's test.
There we go. Thank you, Alex. Next question here comes from Matt. Why didn't they test fly super heavy on its own like they did with early Starships before the orbital test flight? Sawyer, want to take that one? Preferably after you unmute yourself.
Yeah, that would help. I may as well just leave it on the whole time, so apologies if you hear me crunching on crackers then. But from my understanding, at least, I don't know do we know the exact reason? Because I've thoughts on to maybe why, but I don't know if they ever gave an exact reason. Do you know, Alex?
I don't think they ever provided an official talk on
Right.
that, but there's plenty of reasons to kind of speculate or assume why that testing wouldn't be as valuable.
Right.
One of my arguments is that if you're gonna fly the booster, it's so complex that's like, just put a ship on top. It's already flown, so just like fly the ship. Why not? Do it.
Plus, if you're using all 33 engines at that point, might as well do it with the vehicle on top, so you get the mass load as well on top of it.
Yeah, it's like it's so much complicated, the booster, and like all its ground systems compared to just flying the ship. Flying the ship, it was fairly easy. It was obviously not like a walk in the park, but it was fairly easy compared to stage 0 for the overall tank farm and like the overall mount, and like it's crazy complex. And so if you're gonna develop all that and design it and build it and everything for just flying the booster, why not put the ship on top, right? It's like, just do it, like fly it.
Exactly. We've got so many of them too. And the other thought I had also is the fact that, again, once you get to that 33 engine firing, that's going to cause some serious damage to some of the stage 0 stuff, I would assume, based off of what we saw from just the 14 engine static fire. So if you're going to, mess up the pad a little bit and have to redo it anyway, might as well full send it.
One thing I should point out, just because I saw that we had it previously, that close up of the QD, and I just remembered all the previous testing of the full stack has had some sort of QD retraction test. So we saw that on last year's test of this stack, like Booster 7 and Ship 24. And we also saw it last week on Friday that they retracted the QD. We don't know when it might happen today, but I will say that if I were a betting man, I will probably do not lose any sort of money betting on today having another QD retraction test.
All right, we'll keep an eye on that for sure. Also worth noting that those frost lines on the boosters seem to have stopped growing, wouldn't you say?
It appears that way, yeah.
At least not noticeably. And definitely no frosting on the ship. So far this looks pretty much identical to the testing we saw last week.
Yeah, by the way,
sort of
A and B test
partial
confirms
test.
no movement.
Yeah, thank you. So it looks similar to last week, for sure. What'll be interesting is if they're in a current hold or something, and then they're going to continue on, or if this will be the extent of the testing, and in a little bit they'll actually start the detank process. No signs of detanking yet, because the frost lines aren't really receding yet. So we'll keep an eye on it, though.
Something that I'm looking at here, and it's kind of bugging me, the fact that the engine chill pipes, it's only one venting rather than two.
Yeah, there is less engine chill vent than last time, isn't it?
Yeah, and that is also true. There's less venting from the engine chill pipes, and it's only from one. And now, this is a complete, like, out of my back theory. But what if each pipe is routed to 3 of the type of the engines? So, like, one for the vacuum engines and one for the center engines. And what we're seeing is maybe one set of engines being chilled down. Maybe, because I don't know. I would personally expect, like, if all 6 are routed to these 2, I will expect both to be venting right now, right? It's like, but having different kind of behavior, just wildly speculating here. I have no like just wild speculation here.
I've never heard Alex hedge quite this much.
I know.
Yeah, but like.
He just
Because
wants to be clear.
people are gonna be like, oh, Alex said this and this and stream it. I'm gonna be, hey, I just said, I don't know. I'm just like, out of my back here, okay? I'm just saying, it will make sense at least to me if they were testing like one kind of engine chill of one type of engine and like one different, like, I don't know, maybe it's just another more simple reason and like, oh, you know, it's probably that, but just speculating here.
Yeah, I think that is not it's not unreasonable speculation, but speculation nonetheless. I do want to dive in. We're getting a little bit behind on super chats here, so really quick, I want to thank Andrew Thompson, who became a PadRep member. Much appreciated for that amount of support. Also, Dave's World upgraded to the red team, so thank you, Dave's World, for your support as well. And Matt PD offering some euros for Jack's ARRI fund. I don't know if I get the reference, but it says more cameras, more fun. So maybe that's a camera term that I just don't know. Otherwise, I'm sure Jack appreciates it nonetheless. Nate Saunders has a question. I think we talked about a live stream too a little bit, saying, without the claws on the QD arm, could the chopsticks be used to stabilize the full stack before launch, or will they swing away before the launch? I think they could be used to stabilize. I mean, right now you see the chopsticks are kind of still in play. Can we tell if the sticks are like completely attached to the ship right now?
Yeah, it's hard to see if there's the pins and everything still in it.
It appears they are connected, yeah.
So, and obviously this isn't a full countdown rehearsal at this point, so hard to say, but it would be interesting, like, at what point in the launch countdown, whether it's before propellant loading or if, like, they load propellant and then they'll swing them away before launch. I mean, it's not unheard of for rockets to have some sort of just stabilization arm. I think SLS had something similar even. Saturn V definitely did, just to offer some stability, especially for these really big rockets. Falcon 9 even, though, in fact, the TE has those claws near the top of the TE that open up and then the TE retracts a little bit just a couple minutes before launch. So would not be surprising if those sticks actually stay in place until a couple minutes before launch or something. And I wonder if that went into the
Hmm.
decision that they don't need the same thing on the QD arm because they'll just use the chopsticks. Interesting thoughts. But
Yeah,
thank you, Nate,
again,
for the question.
my thought goes to Artemis as well, of the fact that
Yeah.
it basically had one thing sticking out to hold it, and the rest was mainly the vehicle mass itself. So,
Hmm.
or in that case, the resting on the solid rocket boosters at least. I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being the same. That the vehicle, once fully fueled and everything, will be heavy enough that they can just retract it and it'll stay upright for the time needed until liftoff.
Yeah. Let's see. Dave's World again saying, "Hello, space nerds. I brought bacon. Appreciate the support." And then another super chat as well. So Dave's World, thank you for all of the support. Greatly appreciated. And then we got a question here from Juan who says, "Since they won't be launching payload on the initial flight test, there's no need to fully load the vehicle. Excuse me. Could this be why they're only partially loading right now, kind of like the suborbital tests?" So, and I'll offer this to Alex and Sawyer as well, but my answer is that even though there's no payload on board, they'll definitely have healthy propellant margins on that first orbital flight test. Definitely worth saying that they're still going to will still almost certainly fully load the vehicle, and here's why. Especially when you're going to orbit, even with no payload on board, your propellant margins aren't huge, and there's no super added. You're not really adding risk to just fully load the vehicle. Obviously, you have to do it eventually, and part of the first test flight will be proving that your propellant load systems work and things like that for a full propellant load. Also, given that it's the first ever test flight, if you have some subset of engine failures or something during the ascent, you will need extra propellant to make up for the performance lost without losing the flight altogether. So for orbital flights, even though you have healthy margins and things like that with no payload on board, you will still want to fully fuel the vehicle. And that's why we're expecting a full wet dress rehearsal to precede the launch attempt. Also, want to address that still not seeing any frost on the ship, which of course would be part of the wet dress rehearsal. And the reason we're not seeing that is because they are not loading enough propellant into the ship for it to reach the sides of the tank walls and to form frost on the outside. We're only seeing barely enough for one of the engine chill vents to be active right now. So they loaded a little bit at least, but they could have been even just for the purpose of flowing some through the engine section rather than actually loading the tank. And on that front, paying attention to the other frost lines that did form, those frost lines are receding now on the booster, which is a sign that they may actually now be detanking the booster. This is still very similar to the test sequence that we saw last week, where they partially loaded both tanks on the booster. They flowed some propellant into the ship so that they could activate those engine chill vents at least. But then they never loaded enough for frost to form on the ship, and they didn't fully load the booster. And then they went to detanking, and that was their test for the day. We did also see a QD retraction last time, which we haven't seen yet, but of course that could still happen. But definitely appearing that we are in detanking for the booster. Worth pointing that out. Alex, sorry, anything to add to the updates I just pointed out there?
Well, just pointing out that so far it's pretty much looking like last week's tests so far. You know.
Yeah, I was just
We-
gonna
we
say,
saw
pretty
the
much
kind
it's
of
looking like
theme.
last week's test so far. Get it?
Yeah.
Because I said the same thing as him, like it's the same thing again.
It's the same thing.
Is there an echo in here?
Yeah, it's like the Office meme. You know, tell me the difference between these two pictures.
It's the same picture. But yeah, so we'll keep an eye on this for a little bit. Definitely don't want to go away prematurely, especially if we're going to do like a ship QD retraction test or something like that. Still plenty of time for more testing today, and the window goes all the way till 8 p.m. local time, so 7.5 hours remaining in the testing window today. But I also have some more questions here. Good question here from Lucas, who says, does the weight of the ship sit on the booster or does it sit on the chopsticks? And you know what? This is an interesting point. Given that they're not fully loading the booster, and they haven't really prop loaded the ship much, we've also gotten questions in chat like, do we know if the booster needs to be partially or fully loaded before they can load the ship because of weight reasons and things like that? It's not unheard of for that to be a factor in cryogenic loading of launch vehicles. I wonder if part of the chopsticks role is to actually offload some of the weight of the ship, at least for now, either because it's a test campaign and they need to prove out some systems or do some measurements and things, or that it's doing it because they're not loading the ship or they're only partially loading the booster or something like that. I wonder if the chopsticks are holding that role, and during a normal launch countdown, that's not actually needed or something. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
I do wonder though, what's the strain on the hooks holding both vehicles together?
Yeah, it would have to be really strong, but then again, like you were talking about with the Falcon 9 with the TE, it does retract, and pretty much the only thing connected to it are a couple of pipes and cables and things before liftoff. So in this case, I feel like it would have to be able to take the weight of it and sit on top of just the booster, because the booster is also then being held down on the OLM. There are launch clamps and things there as well, so that's why I would think that the brunt of it would be on the booster itself.
There you go. Thank you. JP Casper says, would we expect a complete load for the booster and ship for the static fire? So, current expectation, also thank you whoever ordered the Artemis 1 for Fun shirt. Shout out to shop.NASASpaceflight.com. Fun fact, if you order it, it'll cover up the nose cone of Starship, apparently.
Not Alex's face today.
Not Alex's face today. But current expectation is that they will actually destack the ship prior to static fire, and that's just based on one Elon Musk reply on Twitter, so obviously not full confirmation or anything. They also ordered a Falcon Heavy print. Nice. So that plan could certainly change. But either way, we would probably not expect a full load for static fire. They load enough that the weight is where they need it, and obviously that they have the propellant to fire the engines. All previous static fires have been very much partial loads. It's very unnecessary to go through the hour-plus long fueling timeline to fire the engines for like 3 seconds. So, very unlikely that they do a full load. The full load will be the wet dress rehearsal, but not the static fire. Unless SpaceX decides to do something different that they've never done that way before.
Because SpaceX.
That does, and I should differentiate, that is different from how they do Falcon 9 static fires, for example, because a Falcon 9 static fire or a Falcon Heavy static fire is also a wet dress rehearsal, so they do the full propellant load sequence, fire the engines for a couple seconds, and then they act like basically it was an aborted launch attempt, and then they go through the abort checklist and stuff, which is different. When the test is only purpose is to test the engines, you very rarely do a full propellant load. Let's see, what else we got? Colts has a question that I'm not sure we know the answer to, so I'll pitch it to the class here. Do we know about how much fuel or oxidizer is lost to boil off during a wet dress rehearsal? I think I saw a similar question asking like what kind of percentage we would expect them to be able to reclaim. Do we have any hard numbers, or are we purely speculating on that front?
No idea. In terms of the percentages and like boil off rates, I don't think we have a clear number on that, but it is certainly a lot, and that's sort of why I'm not expecting any more testing this week. Not just because like I usually talk about the tea leaves and kind of trying to interpret things like the closures and the exclusion zones or whatever. It doesn't seem like there's going to be any more testing this week for the full stack, apparently. But also on top of that, it's also the fact that whatever they may lose today to boil off, it's going to take a while to recover and to put back on the tank farm. They not only use, so for example, liquid nitrogen, it's not being loaded onto the vehicle, but it is heavily used for chill down of both liquid oxygen and methane. It is vented mostly every single time. It is also used for chill down of the pipes and like purging and things like that. Then liquid oxygen, it's also used, it gets lost, there's boil off losses, and methane, it's also lost. Otherwise, probably not a lot, but as I said before, there are vents on the tank, and the tank is pressurized by a autogenous pressurization. So one will expect that the gas of that methane is actually what is being vented when they do that. Now, is that a lot? I'm not really sure about the quantity exactly, but it certainly seems like they need quite a few days to reload all of that back on the tank farm. And actually, I think we have something on the latest Starbase video of like tanker trucks coming in to the tank farm day, after day after day, ever since the test that we saw on Friday. So that's my guess. We're probably gonna see the next test of this full stack next week, and not this week.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. Keeping the questions and messages coming here. Wes became a red team member, so Wes, thank you so much for that support. Appreciate it. And oh god, Lubomir maybe? Sorry if I completely butchered that name, my apologies. I do want to thank you for your support, and I want to answer your question, which has what happened to the QD arm clause. Touched on that earlier. Looks like they just decided that they were not needed for whatever reason. There were originally arms on that, or there were claws on that arm that you see on the left-hand side of your screen that we expected were used for stabilization of the vehicle, and speculation is that they could possibly just be using the chopstick arms instead, or they just simply determined that they don't need any sort of stabilization, and so they removed them for simplicity. But other than that, we don't really have any official info or more detail on that.
I'm not questioning chat. They were not tagging us. You should tag if you want a question to be answered, by the way. But I'm looking at chat anyways because I'm a good person, and I just want to say something because they're asking why are they doing this test if it is the same as last week. I'm gonna mention a very famous phrase from Jack, which is more data, more better.
Yes.
Why repeat the test to gather more data? More data, more better.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
also, I mean, yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, there could be something that we don't know about that they saw in the first test that they want to either try again or try a different fuel loading mechanic or whatever it may be. Just go through it again, recreate the same scenario, and see if whatever you did fixed it.
And yeah, just worth mentioning that we don't know anything super official about the like the timeline that they are aiming for or what the exact test they're going for. So we don't know if they like. Granted, the fact that they've done basically the same test twice in a row does kind of indicate that that was the plan and they've just done it twice in a row. I feel like that's more likely than they hit the exact same issue at the exact same time twice. But that's also possible. We don't know what's prompting the end of that test. Whether it's the plan or they run into an issue, etc. But either way, more data, more better, and they're definitely repeating that in advance of the wet dress rehearsal. Speaking of that front, I believe we have a cool angle that we can show from another bit of remotely controlled camera gear. This from our own Nick and Sweeney, of course. A very cool photo showing the far side of the ship and booster full stack during today's testing. That's a photo captured remotely, of course. No one violating any road closures or anything. But remotely deployed gear there, and you can see a little bit more of the tower side of the stack there with the frost lines formed and the arms attached and things like that. So a cool photo we wanted to share there, just coming in from Nick. Thanks, Nick, for being out there and setting up that gear ahead of today's testing. Still, on this side, you can really now see that the frost is receding. Not seeing much on the ship side either, so looking more and more similar to the previous round of testing. Let me bring in the next question here. Yes, I was going to prompt to this. Alex, I'm going to go to you on this one because you've explained this like at least 3 times. So you're the expert at this point. Can you just quickly explain how the booster and Starship connection interface works?
Okay, so there's not a separation mechanism, there's a hold mechanism. That's sort of the short version. And now, that hold mechanism, basically what holds together both vehicles, are 3 pins on the top of the booster, and each pin has a hook that hooks up to basically another end on the ship and keeps it in place as the vehicles are stacked and then during flight and everything. And the theory, at least, based on what we know from Elon and what we've seen with those hooks and everything, is that at some point near Miko, those hooks are gonna open, right? and the engines will shut down. They're gonna be doing like that kick thing that Elon mentioned to Tim Dodd last year, right? And then they're gonna be separated just by inertia. There's not gonna be any sort of separation mechanism. They're just gonna be held together, and then separate with like a kick as they go into space. That's sort of the whole deal. Whether that's gonna be the case or not, we'll see. We'll find out. I hope it is on the first flight. I hope we don't have to see like 2 or 3 flights or something like that to figure it out.
There we go. We're definitely going to see that first time that we reach a nominal MECO or BECO, whatever they're going to call it. Haven't really given that up yet. I hope MECO, because the ULA thing of calling the first stage the booster is like annoying to me. I know that's a dumb thing to be annoyed about, but like the main engine is on the first stage. The main engine can't be your upper stage engine. I know why they do it, but it just is weird to me. Anyway, hopefully the first stage is MECO and then the ship is like SECO. Although they'll call it Starship engine cutoff or something. And then I guess you could do BECO and SECO. I don't know. But then there's no main engines. You gotta have a main engine. You gotta have a MECO call. Anyway, I'm digressing.
It's gonna be Chico.
Chico? Why would it be Chico?
Super heavy engine cutoff. And it sounds like Chica,
oh,
which is
Chico,
right? It's like Chico, Chica, sort of like in Spanish. Anyways.
Let me see.
Chico,
Next question
because it's
here.
like SHECO. Anyways.
Yeah. I thought you said like CH, and I was like, where are you getting the C from? SH. I'm with you now. We have Chico and Seco? That'd be terrible. You could make it ST, Stico.
Starship engine cutoff.
Yeah.
Super heavy engine cutoff.
Alright, I'm moving on before this conversation becomes worse. Mark K with a good question. Does the QD arm load both the ship and the booster? Just the ship, right, Sawyer?
Yes, that is correct, but that has all of the fueling lines as well as eventually will also have data and connections and things that they can get the info from and make crucial decisions with ahead of liftoff.
Thank you. Next question here. Yo Man says, will each ship have its own dedicated booster, or will the same booster be used for multiple ships? I think there's two different answers for this, because initially, the boosters and ships are both being, sort of iterated and improved upon every once in a while. And so, like I think earlier at least, there were ships that were only actually compatible with previous boosters because of the new connections or whatever. I think they're past that point now, Alex. Like, if they really needed to swap either a ship or a booster, they could, and they'd be compatible with one another. Is that accurate? Like, could they put ship 25 on booster 7?
There's probably some compatibilities going on there. I'm not fully sure, though. Because apart from those pins and, like, the hooks that connect the ship and the booster, it doesn't seem like there's any other connection. Now, there might be some other connections, sort of in like the sense of the avionics, software, whatnot. But apart from that, it doesn't seem like there's some kind of difference in how they connect, at least so far. I really haven't seen it though. Might be misremembering. We'll see. It's also been a long time since they started building like Booster 9 and Ship 25. Remember, Booster 7 started its testing 9 months ago, on April 2022. So, just saying, it's been a long time with Booster 7.
So the second half of this question, the answer that I also want to give is, down the line, I would be almost certain that the boosters and ships will all be interchangeable once the vehicle is more operational. Because I can confirm that because Elon has said in the past when describing the sort of concept of operations for down the line Starship ops, is that the Super Heavy booster would come back, be caught, put back on the launch pad, then a new ship would be loaded, possibly even before the previous one comes back, in the extreme case. So, booster and ship definitely going to be interchangeable in the operational sense. It's just a near-term thing where they're still hashing out the design, their test vehicles, where there might be certain vehicles that are only compatible with certain other vehicles. But down the line, they'll definitely be able to interchange boosters and ships. A very good question. It's not in any of these views. Or Michael, do you want to find a view with the other ship in the background? Because people are asking about that other Starship that's hanging around the launch site. There we go. Thank you. That is Ship 25, which was just placed onto one of these suborbital stands, which is basically just a test stand at this point. Do we still call them suborbital pads if they're not launching suborbital flights? I don't know. But it's there for
Never say never.
Never say. Oh, jeez. Listen, you know what? I would take it. But yeah, most likely just a static fire test at this point. You can see the crane is still attached there, but expecting Ship 25 to enter a static fire campaign, presumably sooner rather than later, as it should be the next Starship after Ship 24 to attempt an orbital flight, and so they're getting ready for that test campaign. Let's see. DA Swanson gifted a Red Team membership, so thank you to DA for that support. And Jim Cavett, thank you for gifting a Red Team membership as well. Much appreciated to everyone who sends support our way. And I want to thank everyone who sends support our way in all sorts of ways. There's the memberships, there's super chats, there's simply tuning in and watching the stream. I do want to offer another way that you can support our coverage should you choose to do so, and that's, of course, shop.nasaspaceflight.com, where we are always adding new merchandise for you to support the team here at NSF and allow us to continue to improve our coverage. We've got a lot of cool things. The newest thing, we got some new Falcon 9 merch coming up, but of course, if you're here on a Starship stream, you want to know about our Starship merch. So we've got the Orb Destination Known collection, which is a new Starship design with a little bit of Moon and Mars hidden in there. You get it, you get the design now. Where Starship will be headed in the not too distant future, and that's available on a couple different shirts. And let's see, a hoodie, a sweatshirt, a hoodie. I said hoodie twice. I meant to say t-shirt. T-shirt, hoodie, sweatshirt, things like that. Also some new metal prints, of which several are Starship themed from your own NASA Spaceflight photographers. I see a couple from Nick and Sweeney on there. I believe that one's from him as well. So we got some full stack ones, also got some ship specific ones and things like that. Lots of fresh photos, and we're constantly adding more and newer ones. So if you want to support NSF coverage, buying some metal prints or some merch is a great way to help support what we do and allow us to continue improving our coverage. So thank you to everyone who does do that. Also, the new benefit is when you do order something on the shop, it shows up on stream live, and we will thank you on air as well. We won't know who you are. Not going to dox you or anything. No, your address doesn't show up or anything like that. Just shows what was ordered, and we'll happily shout you out for doing so. So thank you to everyone who sends support our way via the shop or otherwise. Bring in our next question here. And Trevor wants to know, why don't they attempt to land Ship 24 on a barge in the ocean instead of a splashdown? Sawyer, any speculation there?
My speculation is needing a barge that's ready to handle something that size and getting it over to Texas. Because right now, there are 3 total. You've got Just Read the Instructions and a Shortfall of Gravitas over on the East Coast, and then, of course, I Still Love You out on the West Coast. And as you've seen, it's pretty darn big. So I think for now, the plan is to test it just splashing it down as if it were kind of a controlled landing, as it would be, say, if it was going to be caught or brought back to Texas to try it again. So that would be what I think the reason would be. Again, you wouldn't need it in the future, and the ones that you have now are not necessarily equipped to handle it.
There we go. Yeah, thank you for that, Sawyer. I think someone's done the math. Like, the ship barely fits on the barge, but the ship's like way too heavy. Like, it would not work. And we're talking about like the drone ships, obviously. And there we go, like right on cue. Thank you for whoever ordered the Destination Known hoodie. I guess the plug worked. Appreciate it. I hope you liked your hoodie, and thank you for your support as always.
Those hoodies are so comfy.
The hoodies are real good. I can attest that the hoodies from NSF. I have the Falcon Heavy version. Very nice.
Yep.
Greatly enjoy it. All right, here's a good. A very good question from Adrian. I don't think this is our Adrian. It doesn't say Adrian Bile. It just says Adrian. Saying, how much does the thermal protection system? If you ever hear us say TPS, that's what it stands for. The thermal protection system on Starship weigh. Given that HLS, the Moonlander version, is not going to re-enter the atmosphere, presumably that would increase HLS's load-carrying capability. That is a very good point. I'm sure that the heat shield is not a negligible amount of mass, and HLS will not need that because it's basically in-space operations only vehicle.
It is 10 tons of tiles.
10 tons.
As of the last measurements, according to our L2 forum, the last time we saw it, it was 10 tons worth of tiles of tough rock. Holy tease.
That is 10 tons of moon rocks you can bring up from the lunar surface up to the gateway station and stuff like that. So there you go.
So they
About
cannot
10
fit on
tons.
Orion.
Yeah, and then you would need like a lot of Orions to get that back, but that's a future problem, Alex. That's a problem for
We'll
Orion.
deal with
Starship
that
does what
later.
Starship does.
Which, by the way, not to show off or anything, but I have weird acronyms memorized, including Tough Rock, which is the toughened unipiece fibrous reusable oxidation-resistant ceramic material on those tiles. So it's
Bless
a
you.
little bit lighter than what we had, or it's a little bit different to what we had on Shuttle, but that is Tough Rock for you.
Oh, jeez.
You want me to say it slower?
I think I caught
was
that.
wild.
People, there's gonna be a test later, Chad. I hope you copied that down. Thank you, sir. That's very cool.
Again, the random acronyms that stick in my head. You're welcome.
By the way, shameless shout out. There's a random internet browser plugin called NASA Acronyms where you can highlight basically any acronym and it'll give you the list of possibilities. And it's like all space acronyms. NSF is on there. If you highlight NSF, one of the options it'll say NASASpaceflight.com. But in case you're struggling in the acronym world, can highly recommend that plugin. Anyway, we got some more questions coming that I want to wrap up here. Sepsep saying, when they do a wedge rehearsal, do we expect the booster to become fully frosty? I would say so, yes. But we'll expect both the tanks to become frosty in its entirety. The only parts that will not get frosty are the part between the tank. There's a little bit of, obviously the Super Heavy does have a common dome rather than an intertank area, but there's still a little bit of that area in the middle of the booster where you have some extra stringers visible where it probably won't get super frosty because there will be a dome there and there'll be a slight gap. And then obviously the interstage, the part where the grid fins are and right above the methane tank will not get frosty, no fuel there. And then same thing for the engine skirt on the ship. But otherwise, the vehicle should get fully frosty. Oh, and the payload section. That won't get frosty. And someone ordered the Of Course I Still Lie Here towel. I have one of those too. Highly recommend. Great beach towel. Thank you, everyone who is sending support. Thanks for buying the towel there.
How appropriate after the booster question, too.
Yeah, exactly. We were just talking about margins.
Rehearsal, right? It is not. It is not. I was just kidding.
Were you though?
Moving on.
I was actually going to point out that while we haven't seen a fully frosted booster like with actual propellants, we have seen it with like
With
a
just a cryo
cryo
test, yeah.
Exactly, which is basically filled with liquid nitrogen, and it does seem like at least those stringers on the weld of the common dome, they actually get some frost over. So I'm kind of wondering, once we actually go into that full load of propellant, whether we actually see like everything frosted over. I'm really looking forward to that. Like that's gonna look cool.
Oh yeah, especially with the heat shield there on the ship as well. It's gonna look really cool.
The next question here from Joss saying, chances of a starbase near Seattle, Washington, where Starlink satellites are currently made. Not sure Seattle blends itself well to a launch site, although the Chris B voice in the back of my head is telling me point to point. If Seattle's a big enough market, there could certainly be a point-to-point spaceport near the Seattle metro area. But yeah, the current home of Starlink production, I do not believe is going to be a near-term Starship launch facility. They're definitely focusing on Texas and Florida for now. Maybe some sea launch platforms. Maybe they could go to Vandy or something. But until it's Earth-to-Earth transportation that we're talking about, unlikely that there'll be something in the Seattle area, I would say.
Yeah, unless that's where they end up plant. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, unless they plant Phobos or Deimos or whatever they're calling them now somewhere.
Yeah.
I was about to say that there's indications that maybe satellite production for Starlink might be moving.
Oh yes, thank you.
Or at least something related with the Starlink. At least it seems maybe the terminals or both terminals and Starlinks might be around that thing, but we'll see.
Also, it's definitely possible that they'll simply be adding to the capability. Like they're not going to remove the Seattle facility; they'll just add to with the Texas facility. But yeah, there is a new SpaceX facility in Texas. I forget where exactly, but with a Starlink stuff. Also, the launch entry and landing hoodie, another sale there. So thank you so much for that support. Whoever bought the Falcon 9 landing themed hoodie there, saw one of those today with a GPS mission.
You think we need one of those, but for Starship, like super heavy or something like that?
Oh my goodness, we absolutely need to make a super heavy version.
33 engines.
Easy. Yeah, all right, well, chat, write it down. my personal promise that that'll be a thing once Super Heavies are actually landing.
Will
Gotta
those
get to
all
launching
fit?
first.
Will the 33 engines actually fit on the mud version though?
You know what? That's a very good question. They're going to be much smaller dots on that version, I think.
Which we do have a mug version.
All right. Also, an NSF logo sticker. Highly recommend the stickers. Quality buy. Indulis has a question. When everything finally goes up into space, Starship will fly with the heat shields pointing upwards in the same way as the shuttle rocket did. Ooh. Oh, that's a good question.
Ooh.
So
Really
shuttle.
is.
So I mean, the shuttle didn't do that because that's where the heat shield was. The shuttle did because it wanted its wings pointed downward to help with the pitch down range, I think. And so, yeah, it probably matters less for Starship because everything is still more or less symmetric, right?
Well, part of the other thing with the shuttle too is yes, you had the heat shield upside down as well, which could help with some of the sun heating. But you also had the radiators on the inside of the payload bay doors that would extend, so that way it vented downward as well. So.
Oh yeah, I was thinking more like during the ascent.
Yeah.
During the
That's what I'm
ascent.
thinking as well, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was
shuttle didn't really matter as much as well because you had the orange external fuel tank too.
Right.
yeah. But I thought that rotation was merely for the windows to be located like looking at the Earth.
Yeah.
That it was heads down and you can see the horizon as it goes over. And like I think that was also a thing for like Saturn and might also be for SLS. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's one of the reasons they did that. And then like later on the shuttle program, once they were like T plus 5 minutes or something, they roll heads up basically to be able to talk with the TDRS satellite network, whatever.
Yeah. Near the end of ascent, they got to roll for comms anyway. So that's a very interesting question. And Starship could definitely have something similar to that too, as far as maintaining comms during the ascent corridor. We'll have to wait and see. That's a very good question. And yes, Chris K in chat mentioning that the new Starlink facility is in Bastrop, Texas. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Really
I'll take
quick.
a bass trip with you, Thomas. Oh, that's the name of the place.
You don't want to go fishing with me. I'm not a fisherman. Joe gifted 10 Red Team memberships. So Joe, thank you so much for that support. Much appreciated. And then Gina became a PadRat member. So thank you, Gina, for joining the membership program as well. Everyone, I want to thank you all for tuning in for today's stream. As you can see, detanking has continued, and the frost rings continue to recede on the booster. We are looking more and more like this test is concluding the same way as last week's test. And so while they're still into wrapping up those operations, I want to thank everyone who sent support, including ordering that Artemis 1 shirt. Shout out to whoever ordered the Artemis 1 shirt. But I think that it's going to be our cue that we are going to wrap up coverage for right now. Obviously, if testing does spool up once again, we will absolutely come back on air and offer some more commentary, either on the dedicated stream or on Starbase Live, something like that. Of course, we already have 24/7 cameras for Starbase Live all the time. So to keep an eye on Starbase and the finishing of today's testing, we're going to throw you all over to Starbase Live. But really quick, we'll go around the horn. My name is Thomas Burkhardt, been one of your hosts for today's stream, and I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. We also had Alex on comms. Alex, thank you so much for hopping on.
It was a pleasure.
And Sawyer Rosenstein was on comms with us as well. Sawyer, thank you so much for your expertise.
Absolutely. To go from Falcon 9 to Starship, that's a great day to me.
All right, absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for watching. We'll head on over to Starbase Live to see the conclusion of today's testing, and we'll come back if needed, but looks like testing is concluded, so we're going to sign off for now. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.